Chris, welcome to Waterstones.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you about this book, and as I was saying to you just before we rolled, I'm not a big reader of crime-type books, and I'm saying crime-type books because I'm not sure I would classify this as crime, and I know that you like to sort of cross a few boundaries.
I do.
But what I found was that because the book is so rooted in the characters, I was just compelled to keep flipping through those pages, and then of course became incredibly invested in their lives because we watched it happen over several years. So I wondered whether we could sort of have a little think about where this book started for you, whether it was in one of those characters in particular, or whether it was the setting, or what it was that you wanted to write about.
It was kind of quite a crimey pitch, like a top line. Two abducted teenagers fall in love in the pitch black basement they're being held in, having never seen each other. The boy escapes and can't find his way back to the girl. And I had that the police don't believe that she's real, like they think that he conjured her out of his mind because of the trauma. But he knows in his heart that she is, so sets out to find her. So it was quite a neat pitch, and sounds quite. The start certainly sounds like crime, you know, the abduction. But then it evolved into this massive kind of sprawling, huge story of friendship and love, and took in everything kind of. So it starts in 1975 and runs for I think 27 years. So you're going to get a huge range of emotions and kind of subplots within that. But I think I was supposed to deliver it in. They wanted a book every 2 years, like every other year, and I was like 2 years past that date. So now it's 4 years, amazingly, since we begin at the end.
That's incredible. Well, I think that part of that is, I think there is an element where crime novels can be written, I wouldn't say churned out, but if you're on that kind of schedule, it's possible to do that. Whereas
the Patterson schedule.
The Patterson schedule, as they call it in the biz. But I suppose when you're writing what is, quite a literary novel actually, and with these characters and this huge timescale, that is going to take time. In fact, I was reminded, because like I said to you, I don't really read a lot of crime because my brain is not very interested in trying to solve things. Yeah. But I do care about characters, and I realised at the beginning of this book, I'm actually quite into children trying to solve crimes.
Me too, yeah.
And I was thinking, why is this, or what does this remind me of? And I thought of The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, and there's a book called Spies by Michael Frayn. And really, these books aren't really about the kids solving crimes, but it's about children becoming adults, learning how the adult world works. And that's absolutely what this book is about, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's just a fascinating time in life, and I think that the things that you happen, I was looking back at my own life during it and during writing this, and I think that things that happen when you're a kid, like they really do go on to shape, the rest of your life. And so if you pick up with someone at that stage, and then you can kind of watch it unfold, and you think, like at the beginning of the book, Patch, who is the star of the book, along with Saint, steps in when he sees a girl being abducted and stops it and gets taken himself. And that event, like, it's going to be terrible and catastrophic for him and everyone around him, but it's whether they can overcome it and how they deal with it, and how black and white it is. Is it, because on the face of it, it's terrible. It's a terrible thing to endure, but through it, he finds so much out about himself. He finds art and becomes a successful artist later in the book. And I don't think he would have done that. And he goes off searching for this girl that he thinks he was held with, and kind of sees the entire country, and he sees the most beautiful sights. And this is a boy that had never left the town that he grew up in, and probably wouldn't, because the doors were kind of closed to him. He's got quite a difficult home life. His mum is struggling, is not a great mum, drinks too much. His dad died in the Vietnam War, and so he's really struggling. And this event, it kind of is his sliding doors moment.
Let's talk a bit about Patch. An amazing character, as you say, and he has his name because he wears a patch because he has a missing eye.
Yeah, and when he's a kid, his mum tells him he's a pirate, because that kind of softens the blow of, being slightly different. And so he adopts this persona, which is kind of cute when you're a kid, and then when you hit the teens, it becomes like, everyone's going to take the mick.
He has, as you say, a very tough upbringing, and this moment where he witnesses Misty, the sort of, I suppose, the town beauty.
She's the town beauty.
Being potentially attacked or abducted, and he steps in. It says something about his character, I think, doesn't it? That he chooses to sort of do that, even though you know, he didn't need to do that and he puts himself in danger.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about creating Patch as a character and what sort of you put in there before sending him out on the road.
It was interesting with Patch because he does this amazing thing, but he doesn't think it's a choice. Like you and I look at it and think it's a really brave act. And I think there's a line in the book where he's talking to Saint and he says, if he doesn't choose it, if it's just innate, you know, how can it be brave? And it was an interesting way of looking at it because I had quite a rough childhood and someone in my life was quite violent and I, when I was around 10 years old, he broke my arm and I had a really hard time after that. I stopped sleeping. And then when I was in my teenagers, I was stabbed. And I look back at it now and I think I was stabbed because of what happened when I was a kid. Now, I think, it sounds a bit like a stretch, but I think that I didn't like feeling like a victim when I was a kid. So when someone tried to mug me, I refused to give my phone, even when they pulled out a knife. And it didn't feel like I was choosing to be brave or stupid. It just felt like that's the way it was supposed to be. And I think that the same is true of Patch. You know, like I think he has this innate thing in him, and then it causes him to be reckless when he's older, and he has a very black and white view of the world. And I think I used to have that when I was like a bit younger, but I thought it was a really interesting kind of beginning to a story. You know, because if we all have these sliding doors moments, and we do, you know, like sometimes it can be like really like an innocuous kind of like, if you are going to a job interview and you get up late and you miss the interview and then something else happens. And there's all these moments in our lives and some of them are really small and some of them are massive and profound. But there's all these alternate versions of us, isn't there? And I wanted to explore that. And I really wanted to kind of ask the question, you know, if you have a difficult childhood, how much shade does it kind of throw over your future and can you outrun it and what it means to kind of get through it, or even if you can. And I also wanted to weigh up whether it's worth it, because like I said before, Patch has this quite amazing life, doesn't appreciate it, but it's kind of because of this terrible thing that happened. And I don't think, had I been through all this stuff in my life, I would be talking to you and I would have found my way to writing, because it was definitely like trauma that led me to writing, and I wouldn't have found it otherwise. But then, is it worth it? You know, the payoff. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You've mentioned there sort of two things from your own life, so that's a slightly difficult childhood and this stabbing that happened to you. And when I was reading the book, because there is a stabbing in the book, and I really felt it. It felt very, very real, and I didn't know about you yet because I hadn't started Googling and investigating about your own experience with that. And when I found that out, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. No wonder it feels completely real. But the setting of this book and your other books is America rather than the UK. And I wondered whether there's a conscious choice there to write about or to set your books in a place that isn't so close to home that it means that it would be like reliving that trauma, but it allows you to put your experience into a sort of different locale.
It's without a doubt, exactly right, yeah. I found my way to America because after I was stabbed, I read a self-help book because I had some PTSD but didn't know it was PTSD at the time. And found my way to the library, found this book, and it talked about trauma, and you take the traumatic incident, change the people involved to fictional characters, change the outcome to something you're happier with. I think it's like a control exercise. You know, you take control over something you feel you had no control over at the time, but you change the location of the piece that you're writing to the last place you were happy. And my dad took us to Disney World, and so I look back and saw America as kind of a happier place. But then, because everything bad that happened to me had happened in London, it felt like sitting down at my desk, travelling 4,000 miles away. There was some real distance between the story I was telling and my own life. And it sounds really weird because I write books. Like this book begins in 1975 and set in Missouri, somewhere I've never been. And but it feels really personal, like intensely personal. And it's strange. And when I was writing the stabbing scene, I've always had a bit of a problem with like violent scenes in books and in films because they don't quite feel real and they make it quite glamorous sometimes and people are able to carry on and things like that, and the reality is really different, you know, like it's really shocking when it happens. And then there's a period afterwards. I remember the immediate aftermath, the kind of few hours when you're in hospital and you think about how your day began and where it's ending, and then you lie down at night and can't sleep because you play over what you should have done. And I've got kids now, and I tell them what to do if anyone tries to take it, and it's give them whatever they want, because nothing is worth it. But and that's the bit that's interesting. Like the stabbing is the least interesting part. Like the crime is the least interesting part in my books. It's the aftermath and you know, people's ability to adapt and survive that I find fascinating.
When Patch is taken at that stage in the book, he leaves behind his close friend Saint.
Yes.
Saint is just such an amazing
character.
I love
Saint. I really love Saint.
Tell me a little bit about her as a person, and a little bit about the journey that she goes on, because, as I say, Patch and Saint are very close friends, but their life is irrevocably changed by this incident near the beginning of the book.
Yeah, so Saint is kind of Patch's moral compass. You know, I would love a saint in my life. You know, she's just innately good and very strong, but is also kind of her own worst enemy, because she's a bit of a hopeless romantic and believes in fate and true love and things like that. And she and Patch become unlikely friends because they're both kind of loners and outsiders. And so when he goes missing, she is, you know, beside herself. The world is over, and then the police can't find him, stop looking for him. But she has this determination, this kind of feeling that he's okay and he's somewhere, maybe not okay, but certainly alive, and she's going to bring him back. And so when everyone else gives up, she carries on. And then when she does find him and bring him back, he's a different person to the person that she lost, because he's been through this thing. And now she's kind of competing with Grace, who is the girl that he may or may not have imagined was held with him. And so she's got competition for his feelings and his attention and his focus. And I think she really struggles with that. And she doesn't know how to handle it. And she goes to the library and gets books on you know, trauma and things like that to try and understand what he's been through. And then the book takes a turn, because she's this straight-A student. She's heading somewhere brilliant. She lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother has high hopes for her, you know, to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. But she is so caught up in Patch's journey that she wants to find Grace for Patch, because she knows it's the only thing that's going to make him feel better. And so her life takes a completely different turn because of this thing that happened, and she ends up somewhere she would never have planned to be. And I think there's something noble and kind of slightly foolish in the way that she does that. And her grandmother's furious with her, and but she knows, you know, that she feels like it's not a choice.
Well, there's that amazing bit, isn't it, where Saint says to her grandmother that she's going to find Grace for Patch. That's what she's going to do. And her grandmother says, and you'll lose yourself in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
Do you think she does lose herself, or does she just become a different version of herself, I suppose?
And that's another sliding doors moment, isn't it? Because we don't know what she would have been. I think it's safe to say she's very capable, and she probably would have been successful professionally in whatever she did. But I don't know if she does. I think she is as happy as she ever is when she's with Patch. And to go and lead a different life, she would have undoubtedly had to leave him behind and kind of sever that bond that they had. And so I think she would have been unhappy because of that. But it's another one, you know, is it worth it? Is the payoff worth it? And you just never know. And that's what's quite interesting about life, isn't it? Because you just don't know. Like, I used to look back at my childhood and think there's an alternate version of me, you know, and these bad things didn't happen and I had a different life, but I wouldn't have been writing, and writing makes me really happy. So, and Saint ultimately, I think, is happy. You know, she seems to have quite a full life, but I mean, a lot of it is devoted to this. You know, the same kind of obsession that Patch has.
So yes, that's a neat segue, because this is in many ways a book about obsession, about, you know, trying to achieve something. For Saint, it is about finding these people and sort of chasing the victims of this serial killer. And for Patch, it is, I suppose it is this quest to find Grace, the girl that he was held with. The device that you use to do this is so brilliant, because, as you mentioned, he's held in a place where he can't see. It's completely black.
Yep.
And so what he does is to try to remember what Grace looked like from touching her face, and he creates a portrait. Over a long period of time, he basically teaches himself how to paint, doesn't he? With the help of Sammy, another fantastic character. Kind of help, yeah. And then he is so brilliant at creating these portraits that he ends up doing this for other families who have lost children, his children are missing.
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that as an idea, because it's such an amazing motif, I suppose, that runs through the book. This idea.
I really wanted something good to come out of it.
Right.
You know, I wanted not just for Patch, but for the people around him, and I wanted him to, you know, want more than Grace, because he knows that there's 1,000 Graces out there, and just because he can't find his, you know, maybe he can help other people find theirs, and I really liked that was how he found his way to art, because I think it slightly mirrored me finding my way to writing, you know, and coming through something really difficult, and by using art, and he doesn't really appreciate the gift that he's got. You know, he doesn't really think that he's any good at it, and he doesn't really get why people pay loads of money, and by the end of the book, millions of dollars for his artwork. But there's something, I think he talks about, you know, I think he says it's the hope that kills you, you know, and he knows that all of these people are going through the same thing he's going through, and it's the hope that this missing person's going to walk back into your life, or that they're out there and they're okay, and that is almost as bad as finding out that they're, you know, no longer with us or something like that, or just getting some closure on it, because you wouldn't move on anyway, but you can't kind of enjoy anything. And Patch has that. He has all this guilt, doesn't he? Because he's supposed to go to prom, and you know, everything good that happens to him is kind of tainted by this, you know, is this belief that nothing good is happening for Grace. You know, she's still down there, she's still being held, she can't enjoy anything, so why should he? And so he kind of tortures himself throughout the book. And finding other missing girls or helping their families is a way for him to feel slightly better or slightly more okay or connected to her.
We have to be careful, of course, with books like this about spoiling anything.
Yeah.
But I think it's
difficult,
fair to say,
isn't it? I really struggle with that as well.
But I think, as we've mentioned, there are lots of strands of storyline in this book, because it has this very epic sweep to it. And I think it's fair to say that whilst some of those are resolved, there are plenty of other things that we don't find out. And I wondered how you balance that as a writer, and then how you were planning, I suppose, how you would finish the novel, where it would leave the reader at the end of it.
I started the book knowing where it would end, and I did the same with We Begin at the End and Tall Oaks. I knew exactly how I would end the book, but how I get from A to B is like it's kind of a mess for many years, because I write out of order as well. So I spend the first year writing dialogue, getting to know the characters. Year 2 is spent writing scenes in out of order, and then year 3 I start to piece it back together. Right. Year 4 it starts to look like a book, and you know, and then I get some help from editors and people that can make me into a writer, and make people understand what I'm writing. But as for like plotting it, it feels kind of organic, which is a kind of nice way of saying it, I think. But it feels like I know when I'm getting it wrong, basically, and I spend a lot of time getting it wrong in order to know when I'm on the right track. But it's the hardest thing, I think, about being a writer, and it's something I still occasionally want to go and do a creative writing course or something, because I feel like there's a better way of doing it. Particularly pacing. It's incredibly hard to pace a book. And this one I knew would be kind of an epic, you know, certainly in time scale, and I knew that there would be quieter moments in the book between the more exciting stuff, but it was the quieter moments that made the exciting bits more exciting.
Yeah.
But for reveals and plotting, I don't know. It feels right. You know, it feels like the right time to reveal something. Or we know that for Patch, the destination is everything, and kind of the journey doesn't really matter to him. He's just so solely focused, and so that in itself kind of drives his character. But then you have characters around him that are trying to live normal lives and enjoy things, like Saint in particular. You know, Saint meets a boy and kind of falls in love, and we want her to have all these things. But when you place it side by side with Patch's life, it kind of pales slightly. You know, everything pales slightly into insignificance, and I think that is the agony that he is faced with. And Saint is a little bit as well, because she feels guilty every time she's enjoying anything in the book.
It's really interesting. They're thinking about there are lots of different relationships in this book, and there's this really interesting thing about the very subtle difference between romantic love and incredibly close friendship.
Yeah. Tell
me a little bit about that, because a lot of the characters are negotiating that and what that means to them.
Yeah, well, I think there's something beautiful about friendship, you know, about a platonic friendship. Okay, it's not entirely platonic, because Saint definitely has feelings for Patch that he might have replicated had he not, you know, become completely obsessed with finding the mystery girl. But I really, you know, it's easier to sometimes it's easier to understand. You know, like family love, you're in your family, and you can't choose your siblings and things like that, and you love them because they're connected to you in that way, and you grow up together. And with like romantic, that side of it is quite easy to understand because there's a physical side of it. You know, there's an attraction. But with friends, you're kind of choosing these people to be in your life, and that in itself is kind of like a really, it's kind of like a gift. And you choose people that you want to be around, and that is something I considered with Patch and Saint, and it was really nice to write. And when I'd finished writing it and I delivered it, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is like the best story of friendship. That I just absolutely loved it, and I thought Gabrielle Zevin got it just bang on. You know, there's this platonic friendship that spans a long time, and yeah, I just loved it.
That is very good comp, as we would say. That is,
yeah.
I think there is the
I
two
love
books.
that book so much.
Well, it's an incredible book, and actually, I was in a real reading slump this is several years ago now, and I picked up Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow over Christmas, and I read it so quickly because I was completely involved in that friendship, as you say. And I had a similar thing with your book. It's a big book, and I'm not daunted by big books, but I don't often have time.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But I whipped through it so quickly, partly because you do use nice short chapters, and despite the epic sweep of the book, the action is propulsive. You're sort of going through it.
I tried to pitch Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow to my dad, who's a big reader.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult. And I made it sound like I said it's about friendship and there's some video games, and it was so not up his street. And then he absolutely loved it. And it's one of those books, that's quite hard to characterise and define. But you feel confident giving it to anyone that they're really going to get something from it.
Well, you want to just give it to them and say, look, I'm not just to read it, just trust me and read it.
I like that, and I like it when you wrap the books and you can't see what's in it, and it's just like just go with it. Yeah. Don't know anything about it. Just go along for the ride.
With the title, All the Colours of the Dark, can we talk a little bit about that and what its meaning is, I suppose, within the book?
It was a difficult book to title.
Okay.
Like I wrote for 4 years without a title. Like I just couldn't come up with anything, and everyone kept saying to me, it will come, in a way that We Begin at the End came halfway through writing, like it was pulled out of the text. This one just couldn't find anything that fit. I'm really bad at it anyway, but it was Emad, my UK editor, that he came up with loads, and we were going through them. US came up with loads, and that one stood out, and it was partly taken from the book and partly Emad had just said that he felt that it fit, and then I saw it and sat with it for like a weekend just looking at it, just looking at the words together, and it fits in so many ways, because I think one of the big themes of the book is pulling something positive from something negative, and Patch certainly, along with Grace, because she, in his mind, she tells him all this amazing, she kind of paints the world down there. They're in total darkness. She paints a world for him. She teaches him things. And it very much felt like if the beginning of the book is their kind of darkness for Patch and Saint and Norma and Patch's mother and the policeman, and that throughout the rest of the book you're slowly extracting the colour from what happened at the beginning. In the context of the book, that phrase is when they're talking about when you have a sort of moment of almost of revelation, when you understand the true meaning of something. I suppose if somebody was to pick up your book and read it, what would you hope they would take away from it as its meaning? I would hope that, it's going to sound cheesy, but I would hope that however your story begins in your life, the ending is still unwritten, and it's kind of yours to finish, and that would be the takeaway, because sometimes it feels like something awful happens and it kind of defines the rest of your life, or you're going to be defined by these bad things that you've done or you've done to other people or that have been done to you, and that's not the case. It's still wide open. You can be anyone you want to be. I don't think that sounds cheesy at all. That's good. Chris, I could probably talk to you for much, much longer about this book, but I really, really appreciate the time you've given me today. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.